I never imagined I'd be the kind of man sharing my story in a place like this. I used to think tales like these were blown out of proportion, or at the very least, happened to other people, not someone like me, but life, with its twisted sense of humor, sometimes casts you as the main character in the kind of drama you always thought you'd sidestep. My name's Cedric. I'm 38, black, and from Atlanta. This is a story of how betrayal, by the woman I cherished, by my own blood, and by those I trusted most, broke me, and how, through the wreckage, I began to quietly rebuild a life just for myself. Growing up in the West End of Atlanta, hardship was familiar. My mother carried the weight of the world, raising me and my two sisters alone after our father left. I watched her hustle every day, and I swore I'd create a better future, one filled with stability, safety, and abundance for the family I would someday have. I worked my way through college, started my first business by 26, and gave everything, time, energy, sleep, to ensure the people I loved would never have to struggle the way I did. And it paid off. By my early 30s, I had built several thriving ventures: real estate, a car dealership, smart investments. Money no longer kept me up at night. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could finally breathe. That's when I met Matilda at a friend's wedding. She had this energy, radiant, funny, charming, the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel like they mattered. We hit it off that night, and from that point on, I was all in. Our relationship took off fast. Romantic dinners in Buckhead, weekends in Savannah, even a spontaneous Miami trip after I closed my first seven-figure deal. My friends teased me, saying I was completely gone for her. And maybe I was. After years of grinding, I was finally open to love. I gave Matilda everything she wanted: luxury handbags, a new car, tropical vacations, even a custom kitchen after she mentioned wanting to try her hand at cooking. Whatever she needed, I made it happen. We tied the knot 2 years after we met. The wedding was lavish in exactly how she envisioned it: expensive, glamorous, unforgettable. She told me she wanted to stay home and raise a family, and I supported that. Within a year, our first son, Jeremiah, was born. 3 years later, we welcomed Alec. I built us a dream home just outside the city, made sure both boys had fully funded college accounts before they even stepped into preschool. On the surface, we were the picture of success. Our holiday cards could have been straight out of a catalog. Friends often said we had it all, and for a while, I believe we did. I'd walk in the door to the scent of her favorite candles, my boys rushing into my arms, Matilda laughing with her friends in the next room. It felt like home. But every now and then, I'd catch something, an emptiness in her eyes when she looked at me. I blamed it on fatigue or the routine of everyday life. I was gone a lot handling business, but I did my best to carve out time: date nights, spa getaways, surprise gifts, whatever she needed, I delivered. Still, the signs began to show. Her phone was always flipped over. She'd take private calls outside. Girls' nights became more frequent, and she'd come home late with flimsy excuses and a lingering scent of cologne I didn't recognize. I told myself I was just being insecure. Maybe this was what came with having money, success, and a busy life. But that gnawing feeling didn't let go. Then last fall it happened. I came home late from a business dinner, planning to surprise her with her favorite food and some fresh flowers. The house was mostly dark, quiet, except for laughter coming from the kitchen. As I walked in, I heard something that felt like a punch to the chest. Matilda, sipping wine and surrounded by her close friends, leaned back in her chair and said, "He's too dumb to figure out I've been cheating." Time seemed to stop. My whole body went cold. I froze just beyond the hallway, hoping I had misheard, praying this was some twisted joke. But the room erupted with laughter. One friend laughed. "Grr, you wild." Another added, "He probably thinks you're a saint." It hit me then. They weren't hiding it from each other, just from me. I backed out of the house silently, heart pounding, and sat in my car, struggling to breathe. Everything felt tilted, like the world had slipped off its axis. Part of me wanted to burst in and demand answers. The other part, the man who spent years sacrificing for his family, couldn't accept it. I sat there for hours, reliving her words. watching the lights go out, her friends leaving one by one, her laughter echoing in my head. The next morning, she was all smiles, cooking breakfast, asking how my night went, acting like nothing had happened. I looked at her, searching for the lie beneath the mask, but I said nothing. That was the moment I knew I needed evidence, not for closure, but because if I accused her without proof, she'd turn it back on me in a heartbeat. That's how Matilda operated. If cornered, she lashed out. So I started digging. Quietly, I tried checking her phone, but she was careful, real careful. Then one day, I found a second phone, tucked behind shoe boxes in the closet. And that's when everything unraveled. Messages from men I didn't recognize. Group chats planning a beach trip to Miami. Flirty texts about who was hooking up with who. And worst of all, her excitement about seeing her man before vacation even began. I sat there shaking, reading each message with my heart in my throat. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every day felt like a lie. We went through the motions, smiling, talking, but it was all fake. I watched her pack, giggle at her phone, and whisper sweet nothings to someone named Troy at night. That name became poison to me. Still, I stayed quiet. I needed to know just how far this betrayal went. That's when the idea of a paternity test first crept in. I hated myself for thinking it. It felt wrong. But the doubt kept whispering. I remember when Malik was born, her mother joked that he didn't look like anyone in my family. I'd laughed it off at the time. Now, that memory burned in my mind. So I took the boys to the dentist, pretending it was just a routine visit. While there, I collected the samples myself, my hands trembling so badly, I almost dropped the swabs. I mailed off the DNA samples and spent the next 2 weeks in fog. My thoughts were scattered, my emotions tangled. I could barely focus at work, and every time I looked at my sons, my chest tightened. The results arrived on a Thursday. I was alone in my office when I opened the email. The truth hit like a freight train. Jeremiah and Malik weren't biologically mine. I just sat there, eyes glued to the screen, hollow inside. Years of tucking them into bed, coaching them through ball games, singing happy birthday. None of it was truly mine, not in blood. That night, I barely uttered a word. Matilda was in the other room, giggling on the phone, probably coordinating more details for her upcoming beach trip. Meanwhile, I felt trapped inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, I waited until she finished her coffee. I needed to say it calmly. "Matilda," I said quietly, "I know about everything, the trip, the men, the boys." She didn't flinch. She set her mug down, folded her arms, and replied coldly, "So what? You think you're some kind of investigator now? Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to find it elsewhere." Her eyes were sharp, unapologetic. "What I do isn't your concern. You're pathetic for snooping. Don't ever question me again." I fought to stay calm, but her words tore through me like glass. She kept going, mocking me, calling me names. Weak, foolish, not man enough to keep his wife satisfied. That night, she locked the bedroom door and left me to sleep on the couch. The following days were even worse. She flaunted her phone conversations with her lover, laughing, texting openly, not even pretending to hide it anymore. I felt invisible in my own home. Friends noticed I'd gone quiet. My mom called, picking up on something in my voice. But I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. My pride wouldn't allow me to admit that the life I'd built so carefully was crumbling. After a week of walking through that emotional minefield, I hit my limit. There was nothing left. No remorse from her. No accountability. No care for the destruction she'd caused. Late one night, after she drifted off sleep, I packed a small bag, just the essentials. I scribbled a short note. No accusations. No bitterness. Just one line. I was leaving to find peace. I walked out of that house with my dignity barely intact. But I walked out, and I didn't look back. The early weeks were brutal. I moved into a tiny apartment in Decatur. Bare walls, cheap furniture. From dream house to a space that barely felt like home. But it was mine. At night, I lay awake going over every moment of our marriage. Every signal I missed. Ever get feeling I silenced just to keep the illusion intact? Matilda didn't call, didn't text. Through friends, I heard she'd thrown a party the same week I left, laughing, celebrating like I was just an old burden she'd finally shed. Her family cut all ties. My boys stopped coming around. She'd told them I was too preoccupied to spend time with them. Even at work, I could feel the tension, gossip swirling, whispered conversations from people who didn't know the truth but picked sides anyway. The isolation nearly swallowed me. There were nights I drank too much, mornings I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed. But at some point, something inside me snapped and refused to let her be the one who won. I threw myself into work, took every project I could get my hands on, and at night, I cracked open textbooks and picked up where I left off years ago, finally chasing the electrical engineering degree I'd walked away from to build my businesses. I stopped talking about Matilda altogether. The less I shared about the pain, the less control it had over me. Time passed. The days blurred into months. Slowly, the apartment began to feel like a sanctuary. I hung photos on the walls. Yes, even pictures of the boys. They might not have been mine by blood, but those memories were real, and they were mine to keep. I started sleeping better. The weight in my chest began to lift. Meanwhile, Matilda's world started to unravel. The lavish lifestyle she once flaunted couldn't sustain itself. She burned through the savings, then began selling off the very things she used to brag about: designer bags, the custom kitchen, even her car. Friends stopped showing up once the money and perks disappeared, and the men she'd once kept entertained vanished when the credit ran dry. I never gloated. I didn't monitor her life, didn't stalk her online, but word gets around in Atlanta. People quietly mentioned how she was struggling. She had to downsize, moved into a smaller apartment. Rumors circled that she was bouncing between men, not for affection, but survival. She'd lost it all, and maybe she never had anything real to begin with. 2 years after I walked away, my life looked entirely different. I completed my degree, got a 6-figure job offer in Charlotte, bought a new home, modest, peaceful mine. No grand announcements, no social media posts. I told only my mother before I moved. It was a quiet victory, won for myself. I never saw Matilda again, not in person. Every now and then, I'd catch her name in an old group text or overhear someone mention her, unaware of our past. She never reached out, never apologized. The woman who once called me her king now treated me like I was disposable. But over time, I came to understand her opinion had no power over me anymore. Jeremiah and Malik, now nearly adults, started asking questions. They'd heard whispers from relatives. They were curious about the truth. I told them only what they needed to know. The rest, I left for them to interpret in their own time. Sometimes they call. Sometimes I answer. There's no perfect ending, no tearful reunion. But there is truth, and that's enough. What surprises most people is that I never sought revenge. I never exposed Matilda, never dragged her name through the mud. I rebuilt my life not to prove anything to anyone, but because I had to. And in that quiet, steady rebuild, I found a kind of closure no argument could offer. The pain still lingers. Wounds like that don't heal clean, but I'm stronger now. Each night, I sleep in peace. No lies, no shouting, no pretending. And every now and then, I remember the moment that broke it all. Her voice, laughing in that kitchen. He's too dumb to realize I've been cheating. Maybe I was slow to see the truth, but I was wise enough to leave. And that's a victory she'll never understand. If you connected with this story, make sure to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit the subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a new powerful story drop.